Um, and okay, I'm recording. So here we are again, and everybody read. We had chapters 15 and 16.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And you saw my notes on in terms of trying to think about everything that happens to everybody in these chapters.
Right.
Can you restate them?
Oh, well, what I was saying is I was seeing how the state interferes with every decision that people are trying to make based on their own well-being and on their own needs, but every time they've got to navigate this whole series of other decisions. So I was wondering what you thought, and if there were particular aspects of the things that happened to their characters, Kira, Leo, and Andre, that stood out to you as being good examples of this.
Well, I believe you also mentioned the theme plot and the.
Put that in too. Yeah.
Can you reiterate that again about the theme plot?
Oh,
so it's the state against.
So it's the individual against the state, right? And as Rand would like to put out, that she thinks that the individual is the hero, and then the state is the villain in this story. And so what she's putting in, I think, in these chapters are examples of how the state keeps tripping up the individuals from possibly the logical, the natural choices that they would make, but how the state has put up all of these obstacles. Yeah. And so by advancing the theme through these through the plot, through the action.
And practically speaking, that means that every paragraph or every sentence, well, maybe not every sentence, but every little episode or scene should be theme-based. Is that true?
That's how I read it. I mean, it seems like every paragraph hammers home this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think if you've read at all her, she's not a person who is in favor of the arbitrary in terms of what she puts in her novels. Everything is distinctly there for a reason, and I'm sure she could tell you every single reason she had for every single.
That's the mindset. Marilyn, actually, that's the mindset of a screenwriter. That's where you deal with limited time. An awful lot of what she learned from structuring scenes came not only from Victor Hugo and Maurice Maeterlinck and all the plays, but they came from working for Cecil B. DeMille. And that's where she really, really honed her craft, and she's damn good. So what you're seeing is, yes, the state coming in at every turn and interposing its will and basically eradicating or obliterating individual choices. And what came to mind, because my dad was a general practitioner, what came to mind is Britain's NHS. And the story is, I'll make the story very short.
Hey, Ron.
He got hi, Ron. Hi. He got a couple of patients from Nigeria by way of Great Britain. And at first he thought, did they know my mom, because my mom was a Yorkshire woman or whatever. And no, they looked him up in International's Who's Who. And the reason was the son had a heart condition. And he was shuffled to the end of the line every time he was waiting in the queue at the free clinic. Why? Because he was black. And so they got frustrated and they came to see him, and everything was fine. But this is a perfect example, and this is in a putatively free country.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
still think of Britain as a free country, but I mean, it's heavily socialist since the late 19th century. And Euron Brooke, whose name I don't like to invoke too much here, but he gave a talk at Exeter 2 years ago. And he said, well, you know, you ought to eradicate the NHS. And they all looked at him as though they had slapped. They'd all been slapped.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
in a story, but I thought it was relevant here because
I think it's very interesting, a very interesting tie-in. Yes, and we do see, obviously, in chapter 16, we have to deal with some medical issues.
exactly,
And
yes,
we see that. And yeah, so they start very, you know, every single thing that is done. Like I pointed out that short scene with Kira in the morning, and how she just has to talk herself into these things, otherwise to try to get through the dreary conditions that she's living in. And I was just wondering what other parts of this chapter that struck you did you find interesting and would want to talk about? Lindsay, Ron, Michael?
Well, I thought that the hypocrisy that was displayed by his inability to get medical treatment, and
Mm-hmm.
only for those that are part of the party, or only for those that belong to a union, can get medical attention, and I just thought that was just devastating to most people. I mean, I also thought the hypocrisy showed up in a regal way when Victor was allowed to continue in the university, even though he was the son of a successful businessman before the revolution. So I don't understand. I'm having a hard time understanding the philosophy that it's okay for one person to die, but not for all. And yeah, I mean, not for those that are selected as part of the group or part of the selected few that are allowed to succeed, and those that aren't, based on their political or alliance or their ability to be in a union. And it just makes sense to me, Marilyn.
There's an interesting, an aside. There's a famous film shot of Marilyn Monroe in the movie, I think it's Niagara Falls,
I know the film,
where she walks away, and it's the longest scene ever of a woman's backside walking. So it lasts for like a couple of minutes or something, just watch her walk. Yeah. And the story is that she clipped her shoe heel so that her hips would rotate naturally. And I'm bringing that up because in that movie, the other actress, who's kind of like also young and pretty, says, to her boyfriend, that woman has been doing this since she was 12, has been practicing this. And with Kira, it's obvious that she's tone deaf. She's not even if she tries, even if she works it, it's not something that's natural for her to interact with people in an inauthentic way. So it's like she's out of practice, where all the rest of them have been practicing this since they were little kids.
Right.
Like Victor.
Exactly. They've been taught to the women that she's grown up have been taught to appeal to men and to play the game in a certain way, and she just can't do that. Right. She almost thinks like a bloke. I mean, she just, this is what I want to do. I want to work and whatever. And then, so that the love for Leo, in some cases, it's a bit mystifying, but it's genuine.
Genuine.
And I, because I'm returning to this book after 30 years and forgotten most of it, it's just amazing how genuine and actually touching are the scenes between them. When she gets up in the morning at the beginning of chapter 15 and the alarm rings and she can't get up, but she gets up. She wants to collapse, but she doesn't collapse. And she knows, intuitively, she knows that there's something wrong with Leo. And she nearly becomes late for work. And if she's late, she'll be fired. How's that for a great employer? You know, and that's the state. You know, everything through the state, and it's horrible. And it's like I said, it was an SOS, and no one wanted to hear the story. No one wanted to hear the message because everyone was too much in love with Uncle Joe and all that. And we were going through a Great Depression here in the United States during the 1930s, and so no one wanted to hear that. And I think that still, even now, while the book is selling like hotcakes and is still selling and the sales are escalating, she's due for a major critical reevaluation. In time, I think it will come, because just the degree you know, someone was sounding an alarm and no one wanted to hear it, and now there's no Soviet Union.
No,
Hello, you know.
Hello. Who's coming in here?
No, I'm just saying that it's a sort of
Oh,
a.
no, I heard another.
Yeah, they're clueless. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Go
Go ahead,
Something
Michael.
I thought was interesting was the juxtaposition of the opera, to having the operetta. So, you know, saving what little money they had, instead of, you know, food, instead of buying eggs and butter, it's like, let's go to the opera. And I'm surprised that the Soviet Union allowed the operas to exist. So that I found interesting, that was, they obviously didn't put the importance on art as Kira and Rand feel, as something to touch people's spirits and make them feel human.
They co-opted art. I mean, you know the story of Shostakovich, right?
No, I don't. But you know what? Could we stay on that? Because I think we won't get covered everything. But that scene with the art, I think that's there in one reason because it. Remember at the end where Kira bursts into tears. And again, it's just that sense of the only way that any of this is going to happen for them, anything like fun or a pretty dress or anything like that, is only going to be in fiction on the stage. That I think that it really hits home for Kira. That she's never going to have a chance like that. And it's very sad. But, and Ron, you brought up too about who deciding who gets what. But do you remember in chapter 16 about the purge? And do you remember the questionnaire?
Right, exactly. I mean, they asked, they when Kira found out she had been rejected, and Andre asked if there were any exceptions, and the guy he was talking to said absolutely not. There are no exceptions to this rule. Anyone that was the sibling or the son or the daughter of someone who was successful before will never get allowed. And yet here's Victor.
How does Victor, Lindsay? How does Victor get that position? What does he do?
Well, he joins the party.
Yeah, he joins the party, but also like does some favors for some people. Like he gets this woman. He like basically steals a room from Kira and Leo and gives it to this woman who he's sleeping with.
Right. Well, there's
who's in the party.
Who's in the party, and you know, Bava, this woman who keeps showing up, right? Yeah. And she's got I guess perfect proletariat credentials, and he is courting her.
Do you think do you think Lady Sonia had anything to do with it?
Who?
Do you think Sonia had anything to do with it?
I don't know. They don't really seem like they have much of a relationship. I think he just worked these other two angles. I think he worked all the angles that he could to try to save himself. I mean, it's not really for anyone else.
It's interesting. Sonia has a lot to do with a lot of things, but I haven't seen them be good for anybody yet. So, but those questions too, did you notice they're not about your accomplishments or what
the questions.
The questions.
Yeah.
And
it's all about who you know.
Right,
Yes.
where you were born.
Yes.
But I thought that was interesting because there's sort of we were talking about mirrors yesterday in the Fountainhead, but the idea that it's sort of this reverse aristocracy.
Yes.
There's also, the questions are a little bit like original sin. It has nothing to do with the person. They just were born.
Right.
What the parents did. And so it's like,
Yeah.
you were born aristocratic, therefore it's like original sin. You're off our lists.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
That's absolutely right.
The people they're penalizing had nothing to do with their condition, and yet they're being blamed for it and being penalized, which is really not fair to anyone. Because you have no control over who your parents are and what they do. I mean, it's like you're just born. I mean, you don't have a choice. And so your parents are either successful or they're not. And so it just seems also very odd.
Yeah. The resentment becomes incredibly vindictive to the point where people are being shot and murdered simply for no better reason than they were born the wrong class. And
Yes. So Kira and Leo,
Marilyn, can I ask how much of this is fiction and how much of it really occurred? I mean, is this really the way people were treated in Russia after the revolution? I mean, is this factual at any degree, or is it just pure fiction?
Well, we know from Alexander Solzhenitsyn's document of the Gulag Archipelago, and we also know from the work of Robert Conquest that Rand, if anything, was probably being generous.
Really?
Yeah, it was awful.
Wow.
Because didn't also 50 million people or some ungodly number die?
Staggering number, yeah.
From poverty and from the Gulag, or from the camps? Right.
Stalin was probably the world's biggest butcher among dictators. I mean, he was just boggles the imagination. Yeah.
So you just send them off and starve them.
The story itself specifically happened to anybody, but I think everything that's in the story, many things that are in the story are from things that were happening. I don't think she invented this.
No.
No, I mean, there was there was a Great Purge. It was called the Great Purge, where they killed many, many people. So when that term came up, I was like, oh, I mean, that made me think of that. So yeah, I mean, I don't feel like the representation here is that off.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's just to say that Rand is making it personal. Like, there is no jobs. And so the one job you have, and then you lose the job, you're going to die.
Yes.
There's no recourse except for manual labor that no one else wants to do, or can make it through, or prostitution.
Right.
And let's talk about the work ethic. When people do have the jobs, what sort of remember that bit about the word Soviet?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So we
but that's like she's showing. actually, that foreshadows a little bit like who is John Galt. So she's talking like a term that has meanings.
Yes.
And she kind of describes what the meaning is, kind of like a horrible inside joke.
Yes.
Soviet soap or whatever, but it's a euphemism for
reference. Yeah, John Galt, right.
For something that doesn't work. It's anonymous. It's like you don't want Soviet products.
Right.
And then she made them human, talk about the girls being Soviet girls.
Right.
I also thought it was interesting that Kira gets fired because she doesn't have social skills, which means to stand around a desk and talk about their conquests or lack thereof. And
that horrible attempt to try to sound cavalier about.
Yeah, it's like.
You could just.
And that ends up getting her fired from her job. You know that her lack of social interaction.
And then who was it? Was it Comrade Sonia, or maybe it was her boss, but said, "We know that the bourgeois are only saying these things because they want to keep their jobs." And she hits the nail right directly, nails it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah, but think of how perverse that is. Well, of course they want to keep their jobs.
Yes.
Right? At least from our point of view, yes. I show up at my job and I work hard and do what I'm supposed to do because, well, I like it and I want to keep it. But that's a value. That's not a value.
Well, they're not getting you to spout things that you don't believe in.
No, but I'm saying that value, that they don't value having the job or doing the work.
Right.
They have the job because they're who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a reversal again of values, of capitalist values.
Right, because Kira only has her job because of Andre and his connections within the party. And it's up to her to maintain that job. And I think by what Rand has written, she does a good job and she tries to do the right thing and she tries to do, quality work. And yet, because she can't fit in with the other ones who don't care about their jobs, she gets fired.
Yes.
It's just, it's blatant hypocrites. I mean, and I think it's really sad. I really do.
I mean, to me, like, it is and it isn't, because she is also going through these motions and going to do this thing, and she doesn't believe in any of the things that she's doing. I mean, she's also, like, knowingly, like, trying to keep it, but, like, faking it to try to keep it, like. So I felt like that was a really interesting thing within the structure. Like, yes, you want to do the thing, but in order to do it, you have to, like, pretend like you have all these ideals. And for someone who has a lot of really strong ideals, that would be really difficult. Like, I don't see how that's ultimately a sustainable position to be in, because I would think eventually you would have to say, I can't do this anymore, because, like, you would end up like Leo, like, screw that, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to be like, whatever, I don't need it. And, like, that to me, like, what she's doing to sort of carry it is like this moment where you have to make a choice. Like, what do you have to do to stay alive? Like, if that has to become greater than the other things. And so for me, it was really interesting, like, kind of reading about how, like, she'd never really thought about being alive and, like, what that was or what that would require. And so then she discovers it requires all of these things that I think create a lot of conflict in her internally. Like, she's having to make choices every day about, what is the most important thing today? Where is the value today?
Yeah, that's a real good point, Lindsay, because I in that the scenes in The Office, she tries to be self-sufficient, completely self-sufficient. And then she just figures out that maybe she does need to play the game, and it is extraordinarily hard for her, and she's not used to it, and it's kind of twisting her inside, and for such a person to do that, can you imagine Howard Rourke, for example? deciding he's going to play the game at the office.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't do it.
That wouldn't happen. So
No.
I mean, that makes Kira a really interesting character
Yeah.
for me in Rand's universe, because she is making these other sorts of allowances. I mean, I really think like her whole thing about cooking, like you can't, like I'm gonna cook, but you can't watch me. You
Mhm.
can't ever see me do this thing. Like the food is just gonna appear. Like it just happened. And just that notion of that, but yet at the same time, like she wants a really nice new dress and works really hard to like remake this old thing, and then is really disappointed when no one notices. So like, where is the value just in her role as a woman? Like, what is acceptable or okay for her? Or what is she having to do? Because she's having to do a lot of stuff that I think a lot of female characters in literature have had to do. You know, I mean, how many women have like gone behind the scenes in a book to like arrange a situation, like what she's trying to do for Leo? Like she's doing these kind of very traditional female things, but also I think really struggling with the fact that she has to do it.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the job, it's not like she can go and get a job that she wants that is meaningful to her, right? She has to get, I mean, she just gets this job, someone gives it to her, something like that. And so she's trying to be herself, but there's no place for her really to be that self.
Rand also, in a couple of places, lays out the motivation for Kira by saying it's for Leo. And so her mind is going through these options. Do I do this or do that? Or do I bite my lip and keep quiet? Or do I speak out? But she's realizing that ultimately she needs the job because she needs, any future with Leo is dependent upon her keeping this horrible, socialist job. And so she lays it out pretty clearly that there's only a couple of options here. One is to just say to hell with it and die, or to fight for Leo. And then if you're going to do that, you have to like jump on the tram. You have to be a yes person in these jobs. And that's the only option.
Yeah.
But do you think her feelings about Leo are going to change once she witnessed him cheating on her? I mean, do you think that she's going to have a change of heart?
Well, like she forgave him for that in the moment. Like he was messed up, and she was like, "I get why that was happening, but like, collect yourself." I think
So because she does then go out after that and try to help him.
Yeah, I think it's sort of interesting that so much of her motivation is driven by her love for this man, and not by like what she wanted to do with her life. Like all of the sudden, what she wanted to do with her
the
life.
other thing that she wanted to do with her life right now. Why isn't she doing the other thing that she wanted to do with her life right now?
Well, right now it's because she got kicked out of school.
Yeah, okay. So they pretty much just took that away from her and said, it's never going to happen. So she had the two things that she valued, which was her career and her romantic love. And now they've taken one away from her.
And then we also see that she's so exhausted and so tired, and so it's just bombarded that when Leo wants to make love with her, she has to mentally do it like a job. Like, oh my God, I have to be awake for this. I have to rise to this occasion, but I'm not feeling anything. I'm just like overwhelmed by
it's one step away from okay, but you owe me, it's not honeymoon.
Right. Yes, she's exhausted, right?
Yeah.
And she does everything that she can to make sure to try to be there in the moment with him, and she feels awful that she can't give more. So again, I don't know if I would see it necessarily as being as there being something wrong with her. I think that genuinely she values love, and I think she's meant to value it, particularly in this context, because if we look at the Soviet way of relationships, what are we finding out in terms of relationships between men and women?
They seem to be falling apart.
Yeah, about what you can get. It's only because you get something from it that like increases your status or your position or whatever. It's not like, oh, I get the joy of spending time with you.
Right. So it's not personal. It doesn't seem to be personal.
I'm struck by something that Mikhail Baryshnikov said when he made the move over here. Then he was on 60 Minutes, and someone asked him about what life was like in the Soviet Union. He said, every day, every minute, people are lying to each other. And I thought that was, wow, for him to say that. And I think that's probably puts a nail on what was going on. Everyone was basically living a pretense out of fear.
Okay. Yeah, and so she's trying not to. She's trying to be honest. She's trying to have an honest relationship with Leo. She's trying to honestly do her work, even though it's not the work she wanted to do, but they've forbidden her to do that. What about Andre?
I have a question. I read the last chapter of 16, so I did 15 and 16. But I didn't catch why Andre is turning a cold shoulder to her. Did I miss something?
You don't know
Do
yet.
we know, or is that coming? That's coming up.
Yeah.
That's coming up.
Yeah. So it's just.
So that was puzzling. I was like, what's going on there? What happened?
Right.
Michael, I read ahead. It's coming up.
Okay.
All right.
Good. I'm good.
Don't spoil it. Right. But there is that. It's interesting too that because Kira continues to see Andre regularly, right? And she even at one point says to Leo, do you mind? Which is nice. She checks in on his feelings, but I think also she's like, well, but I'm going to see him. And he says, no, I don't mind. It's just don't bring him here, right? But they have that scene where they're out at the beach. Remember that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, entangled in sand and water.
Right, and it's sort of what is that movie? That I forget what it's called. The beach
Burt
scene.
Lancaster.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was thinking of.
And making some old lady mad.
From Here to Eternity. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. Right. See, I think that Andre is just off the rails here. I mean, he was present at the point where Kira loses her chance to where she's purged from the roles, and they ask, can there make, as you pointed out, is there an exception? And no, there isn't. So he has to know that the things that he put in place have destroyed part of this person, this woman that he loves, right?
Right.
But so they continue on, the two of them. I almost think that they're not coming to terms with what's happened.
Well, but thematically, that's the same as what Kira's going through with Leo, in the sense that she knows what's going on, and then she's losing her desire for him out of just being so tired. And then with Andre's it's, well, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Okay, somebody else. Lindsay, did you have any what did you think about Andre?
I like Andre. I like Andre as a character a lot more than I like Leo.
So do I.
Leo's just kind of crabby. Well, I think Andre is really interesting. I think Andre is a better sort of intellectual match for her. I sympathize, or at least empathize a lot with Andre in his position, you know, which I think that says something for Rand, I think, as a writer, to say, like, this is a person on the enemy's side, but I still can kind of get behind him. Like, I think that ultimately, you know, I understand what he's doing and what his role is. And in terms of his feelings for her, like, yeah, I think he probably realized, like, we had this beautiful idyllic day in the countryside, and, like, you know, now what are we gonna do? Like, they can't do that everywhere else. So, you know.
Right. So he's sort of set up a life. He has access to a life that he'd like, but the things that he's put in place actually forbid it, make it impossible for that to actually ever play out.
He's involved in a kind of a contradiction, partly because of his relationship to Kira. And Leo is living in a world that has no place for him now.
Yeah, what's going on with Leo? Ron, you were asking about the cough. Or what's going on with the cough and Leo?
Well, I think what's going to happen, I'm just speculating, I haven't read it yet, but I think that Andre's going to belly up, and Andre's going to bail Kira out because he loves her and give her the money to get Leo treated. And you know, because at one point he made the comment he has more money than he can spend.
Right.
And Kira remembers that, and I think it's in the last chapter we were supposed to read that she was headed to his door to ask him for cash. And you know, so I think that because Andre loves Kira the way he does, he will help her save Leo's life.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting that she's willing to do anything, right? We see her on the street. She goes to all the party officials. She goes to Leo's aunt, right? She at one point just tries to prostitute herself. She just says, "Look, I really need the money. If you could just, you know, whatever you want." And
give me this much. And the guy she asked said, "People that work in your business don't make that much in a year." So it's like.
Right. So it's interesting that she's back in that same situation, but and that I think that's thematic as we go forward to see what happens between her and Andre. But you had some issues with Leo the way he was acting.
Me? My only issue with Leo is that he's given up, or it appears that he has, and maybe it's because he's got tuberculosis. I mean, you know, someone who has a terminal disease, you would think, would have the will to go out and fight for themselves, to try to stand up for themselves and try to position themselves in a place where they would fight for their own life. But I don't see Leo doing that.
But Leo,
I don't see Leo
is aristocratic blood to the manner born, and this is something that I think is beyond. It doesn't occur to him. It doesn't occur to him.
I have a slightly.
Oh, go ahead.
Lindsay?
No, go ahead, Michael.
I have a slightly different take because I like him. I think he's just being a realist. There is nothing to live for. There's no future.
Good point.
And I'm like, if there's no future, what's the point? And you hope that something will change, a revolution will come,
right. But isn't his future?
Someone will solve it, but it's
Yeah.
outside of your capacity.
No, but Michael, isn't his future Kira? I mean, isn't his future based on being with Kira?
Yes, but
I mean,
like,
other
for
than
example,
that, he has no future. You're right, but Kira should be his future, his focus.
Yeah,
And
but
being with her.
even so, in his mind, he could be thinking like, maybe my future is Kira, but it's also eating like spoiled food in this terrible room, and we can't do anything or go anywhere or enjoy anything except like talking about this, and
Yeah.
we're all so tired. Like, maybe, you know, he's like, I have this illness and I'm gonna die, and that's how I get out of it. Like,
Right.
it's freedom. I mean, I
Yeah.
think in a lot of ways, like, not everybody who has an illness, a serious illness, is always going to be like, I gotta defeat the illness. Like, it's sometimes people are just like, this is so hard. Like, life becomes so difficult
Right.
that I'm going to give in to this thing because it's actually going to be better that way.
That's a really good point, because, you know, it's almost like the bumper sticker you may have seen over the years, life sucks, then you die. That's the social. And what's to do? I mean, what's to live for? I mean, and I think that's one part of the point that she's trying to make, is that collectivism destroys all life-serving values. It's a dead hand.
Yeah. I think also hope. Like, nobody, you know, it's really difficult to try to find some hope or to have dreams or try to be innovative or create things or do things when it's not possible anymore.
Right.
So,
He's not going to say, let's go find the best doctors, or we're going to make sure that I get the best care, because there's just nothing out there for him. He can't.
Right.
Whether he wants to or not, right? So yeah, I think he's being very realistic at that point too. It's like, what? Well, what else do I have to do but drink? He's in pain, I think. I'm sure. You remember the Maria Petrovna, and we had that scene of her death, and it was not a beautiful death, right? It was quite painful and quite horrible, and this is effectively what he has to look forward to now.
Yeah.
And there's also foreshadowing of Atlas Shrugged and Dagny, of her fortitude, where someone like Gonk goes, oh, this is not going to work, so let's just have a revolution that totally changes let's change the nature of the game. I'm not going to play by this game. I'm out of here. And so Leo's checking out, but Kira's hanging in there with whatever remnant of love she can have with him. It's the only last thing that she has. So what I'm seeing right at this moment in the book. And it foreshadows that the women characters have fortitude to take on and just look for any crumb of excuse to hang in there.
I agree. I think that it's not talked about enough, that these female characters, and just how optimistic, how intelligent, how resourceful they are, and how caring they are. Notice Kira is something. Whenever her family needs something, she's there, regardless of whether or not they can give her something in return. Please come over and see Uncle, right, Vasily, because he's after Maria died, he's upset, right? And she says, "Sure, of course, I'll be over. I'll be over tonight." So she keeps that alive in herself. She keeps that sense of life, of hope, of what her values. Up against the most
you know, if Marilyn, if I didn't know better, I'd say they were all British, because it's kind of like, well, let's get on with it, we'll muddle through type of attitude, which is very characteristic of particularly the Second World War generation of British women, my mother included, and they were survivors, and whereas the men, kind of like shrivel up and recede in this book. Vasily is sort of losing his grip completely, but the women are like rocks. They're very strong.
Another element that's interesting is that Rand has the reputation that her heroes will, walk over corpses to get what they want, and it's all self-centered.
Yeah.
Like me. So it's interesting that Kira's is that she's authentic.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a very extremely genuine person, which is distinguishing her from the fake people that are just spouting social slogans.
Yeah.
But Kara's interesting that her motivation is for Leo, then to come and visit her family when when she's called to do it. She's not like, well, it's just about me and I want to get, this is what I want out of life. I want this and this for myself. She's very empathetic to the people that she loves.
I agree. Like sometimes I feel like she's kind of altruistic, which is that's really is interesting to me in this case, because it's not something that I really think about when I think about Rand.
Right.
Think about that though, because it's a difference of motivation. Because she's not doing this for their own good. She's doing it for hers.
Right.
Because she loves Leo and she loves her family and they are valuable to her and she wants them to be there. She's not saying, I'm going to give up myself for Leo. She's saying, myself is better with Leo around.
Right.
My life is better. And I think that difference in motivation is very important.
And just as an aside, I think the Rand advocating walking over people came not from her or her books, but rather from reviews that were written about her books by people who were reacting to a Funhouse Mirror interpretation of her views. My opinion, anyway.
Well, that's what I think is that those negative reviews about the egocentric, I think that's their quib with authenticity. So the critics don't like to see a character that is so authentic about their values, their dreams, and what motivates them. So it's an interesting study.
Especially when the author of those books is outselling the reviewer, like Gore Vidal, who said horrible things about her, and then it was not Jennifer Burns but Anne Heller, who in the biography interviewed Gore Vidal, and he finally came clean. And he said the reason I wrote that stuff is because she was outselling me.
It was well, back to that authenticity. What about Andre in terms of authenticity and that relationship with Kira?
Well, one thing is I'm confused about him now because he's turning his back on her. I'm like, what? They just had this incredible romantic time at the beach, and then he's turning a cold shoulder. So I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. What's wrong with this guy? But we'll find out.
The party is watching. The party is watching.
Yeah, I think you're right, Charles.
I think there's a lot of fear, like
the eyes of Sonia are upon him.
Go somewhere else, so.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of things. I think he's not being honest with himself. He wants, well, the fact that he wants this relationship with her goes against all of his party ideals, right? That bourgeois love that he feels for her is exactly what he has fought against his entire life. And now
but I was thinking that it really is a human characteristic to take on your own created values. You make them up. Mm-hmm. They may not correspond to reality, but you just adopt a communistic ideology or some kind of other ideology of postmodernism. And people will stick to it to the grave. They can kill themselves, it kills other people near them, but they will hold on to this ideology.
Without
it seems so ridiculous and stupid, but people do it.
Well, and the thing is, they do it uncritically, and they don't like to hear criticism. They don't like to hear another analysis, and that's part of the problem. You can take on any ideas you want, but you have to ask questions, and people never ask the hard questions. Otherwise, they would realize, okay, well, there's something wrong with this, and that's exactly what you should do. You should never embrace anything without being critical.
But then, if they did that with bad ideas, then that means that they would have to change their idea, and that's the one absolute that they're not going to do.
Right.
So when you see people dying because of your product that you make or something like that, and then you said, no, but I have to make my self-esteem is wrapped up in my product.
Exactly.
And it just started.
This is a big snowball going down the mountain now, because it's not as if Andre can say, oh, hey guys,
Yeah.
I think we made a mistake. Right? Although he may be thinking that, or he may be wondering, he's definitely confused, as you are, Michael. And I think that we're all meant to right now be confused about what is going on with Andre. I think he's written as a confusing character right now, as a conflicted character.
Right.
Yeah, this just in, the Seattle City Council resigns, you know.
One other thing I thought is that they may be threatening Kira. And so to protect her, he's stepping up. But
yeah,
that was possible. One. I thought, I hope it's that.
Yeah.
It would be noble, right? And yes. But again, right, but it's not something that he's supposed to care about, according to his ideology.
That's a good point, Marilyn. He's not supposed to hold personal values. All the values have to be integrated by loyalty to the party. So just by being in love with a person, with an individual, especially one who comes from a bourgeois background, is potentially fatal for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles.
Okay.
And we don't know at this point what Andre's participation was in setting up the rules of the purge. And I guess I thought that maybe Andre didn't have that much to do with it when he actually asked the question, is there any exceptions to the rule? But we don't know. I mean, he may be a bigger player in that than we think.
Yeah.
Or Victor is, for sure.
Yes.
Right. Or it might be, right, the situation where, as we've seen the maneuvering and the manipulation of people like Sonia and Pavel, there's a point where the ideals that Andre has he's losing ground as well, right?
Well, I suspect that he is, Marilyn.
I think he's headed toward existential.
I suspect that Andre is going to come under some sort of fire at some point.
Yeah,
because he has a hidden authentic streak.
Well, I think so, and I think that his love for Kira is going to get in the way. I think at some point.
Well, it's like, you know, the devotion to the party will last up to the point you see Marilyn Monroe walking away in Niagara.
Well, one other thing is that Andre seems to have embraced the party authentically. So he's one of the few that actually believes in the ideology. Where the other people, you see that with their social parties, with their, like when the boss leaves and they sit around and gossip.
Yeah.
But which he would never do. He was like, that would never occur to him to ever do that. But I think that that's also where the people that are playing the game can recognize that person's still being authentic for our cause, but he's not one of us because he believes it. And the trick is it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Very good point.
And what about this money? How come he makes so much money? I'm just wondering in terms of this, of the values of the revolution.
I wondered that myself. He says he has more money than he can spend. How did he get that?
Doesn't spend because he doesn't need anything, which I think is probably the case.
Right. Well, I would imagine he lives in a very austere himself, in a very, very austere way, as though he doesn't really deserve anything.
Well, I think there's related to that woman who comes from England. So you have the socialistic woman who comes from England, who probably doesn't have much money or anything else, but her clothes seem like she's a queen of England coming.
Right.
You know, because she has a normal coat that's just like probably totally average. And so I think that with Andre, he's probably making, 10 cents more an hour than someone else. But that is enough to have a piece of bacon with his potato.
Right.
And I wasn't bringing that up in terms of decrying the rich, far from it. What I was just trying to figure out are the values of revolution and how does that work? Because for my part, I think the rich I've got no quarrel. We should all be rich. So.
Well, I just, I think that he's not interested in the money, but his position and his power is giving him a higher salary than what other people are having.
Yeah, and I do think it will be important thematically and in terms of the plot too, because it will, the fact that he has disposable income, as Ron pointed out, will figure in as the story.
Oh, because that's motivating Kira. She didn't want to go towards him, but she's showing that every avenue is cut off from her. So he's her last chance at saving Leo.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to head into some really interesting territory now. So we have next week the last chapter of Book 1, Chapter 17. And then we're going to do also the first chapter of Book 2. So we're at a transition period here. So just pay attention to the direction of things. What are changes that are being
I anticipate one thing is because of Fran's love of Hugo. This next chapter, I bet the last paragraph is just mind blowing.
Well,
Hugo loves that device. That when you end something, it's so startling and shocking that something outrageous just happened. And then he opens up with another new chapter where it's like flips again. So I kind of wonder if that technical style will come up.
Well, let's start with that next week then. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Marilyn, before you hang up, is this now the new join number for the meeting?
We can continue to use this one.
It switched from last week to this week, and when I tried to log in, it wouldn't let me in, and it said you could only join from a computer. And then you were gracious enough to send Lindsay the text, and she sent it to me with the mobile number. So is the number I used this week the right number?
That was my fault. I was trying to set up the meeting, but I didn't have enough of I didn't have everything that I needed. So we did that and we put up a new one. And we'll keep working on it, but we'll make sure that next week the link is the one that we need.
Okay. Just wanted to check. I didn't want to miss it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
See you later. All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Okay.
You bet. Thank you. Bye-bye.